Elsie Libby of Wells was not a churchgoer, but for years she had listened to the radio broadcast Church School of the Air. She was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1883, and came to Maine with her husband Arthur and their only daughter Elsie. As some of the earliest settlers in York County, the Libby family had accumulated property in Wells and Kennebunk on both sides of U.S. Route 1. Elsie Libby brought to Maine her southern charm and elegance, and both became staples of the tea room she opened in the summer of 1922 on Route 1. Libby's had a southern flair, complete with rose medallion china and a dining area out back for the chauffeurs whose Rolls Royces and Packards frequented the parking lot. For 20 years, Elsie Libby entertained her guests, including President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with a menu of lobster, chicken, fancy desserts, and sweet iced tea. In the fall of 1942, Libby's tea room closed. Elsie Libby continued to call Wells home, surrounded by her antiques and her memories. She bought and sold land, grazed sheep in her front yard, and became something of a curiosity to the folks around town. But Elsie remembered Church School of the Air, and when she made out her will in 1961, she remembered the Maine Council of Churches. Strange as it seems, Reverend Bruce Roberts is elected president of the Maine Council of Churches on the same day that the council votes itself out of existence. 3 years later, he gets a phone call.
The telephone rang and I was asked if I was president of the Maine Council of Churches. Fortunately, I was guarded in my answer, for I was to hear that Elsie L. Libby had died, and the council was the sole beneficiary of her will, which would amount to $1.5 million. I did two things right at that time. I didn't say no, and I called our lawyer.
Elsie Libby's bequest brings the Maine Council of Churches to new life. The gradual sale of the land and its contents sustains the new Maine Council of Churches for the next 35 years. With the rebirth of the council comes new energy. Under the leadership of a committee of 15 and part-time executive secretary Ray Bolger, the council reorganizes and reaffirms its commitment to amplify the voice of Christian conscience. Within the next few years, the council's membership expands to include the Episcopal Diocese of Maine, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Portland, and the Evangelical Lutheran Church. The new council is now unique. With one exception, it becomes the only statewide council of churches in the U.S. that includes as member denominations both Roman Catholics and Unitarian Universalists. With an expanded membership base, the council's impact also grows. Between 1976 and 1989, the council's grants program disperses nearly $250,000 to diverse projects across Maine, providing emergency shelter and building homes, after-school care to hospice care, education and training programs for youth, women, elders, pastors, prisoners, and rural Mainers, advocacy, development, and celebration. In 1986, Tom Ewell begins his tenure as the council's first executive director, and for the next 20 years, under Tom's leadership, the board of directors, staff, and a host of volunteers work to build a culture of peace. 9 world-class Seeds of Promise religious education events are made possible under the Marion Ulmer Memorial Fund. Through its own specially created agency, the council is able to deliver tens of thousands of dollars in emergency help to victims of the Maine flood of 1987, at a time when the state and federal governments are bogged down in paperwork. The council joins with the Jewish Federation, the NAACP, and even the Christian Civic League to effectively thwart the attempt by the Ku Klux Klan to regain a foothold in Maine. The council's steady leadership within the state's criminal justice network results in major changes in how the state's prisoners are housed and rehabilitated. Restorative justice becomes a model for correcting young offenders. In the new century, the council continues its bold mission. Environmental justice becomes a signature issue for the council. Climate change and earth stewardship are now central to community and legislative efforts. Churches have begun supporting local agriculture and reestablishing connections between care for the earth care for our bodies, and care for our community. The Council continues the struggle for economic justice in Maine. By supporting the creativity of homeless or formerly homeless Mainers, their personal stories are shared in dramatic presentations in churches, community organizations, and the legislature, changing hearts and minds in our efforts to transform systems. As access to affordable health care moves to the forefront of public debate, the Council is engaging congregations in dialogue on the scriptural mandate of caring for the sick. The Council advocates for fair and humane immigration reform, affirming that we are not strangers and aliens from one another, but are all citizens in the household of God. A collective moral voice is heard loud and clear that torture by our government or any government of any person is an affront to our humanity and a danger to the soul of our nation. The Council is fostering dialogue within the wider faith community to respond to threats to any of the increasingly diverse faith traditions of Maine. For 70 years, the Maine Council of Churches has been a voice and a resource for congregations, denominations, and the people of Maine. Our work continues, turning systems of exploitation toward economic justice, turning from unlimited consumption to environmental justice, transforming our culture into one of justice, compassion, and peace.
The scriptures say, without a vision, the people perish. To become something more than a random collection of competing self-interests, we need a better way, a vision strong enough to sustain the common good, especially when times are hard.
The vision of the Maine Council of Churches today is the vision shared by the founders, leaders, teachers, prophets, pastors, advocates, and allies of our past. It is a vision set forth in Scripture by the prophet Isaiah.
Is not this the fast I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free? If you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places. And you will be like the watered garden, like a spring of water, whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruin shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in.